71st minute, Dundalk have a penalty. They're 2-0 down on the night, but Hooban can reignite their European campaign here with the goal. Hooban steps up and buries it, and Dundalk are back in it.
We should be together. Maybe we just made it. You could only meet me somewhere in you.
It's all over. Dundalk have put up one hell of a fight, but it isn't enough. Vitesse Arnhem go through. They've won 2-1 on the night. They've won 4-3 on aggregates. And sadly, Dundalk and Bowls are out of Europe. Shamrock Rovers are the last club from this island standing, because Linfield and Larne from the Irish League have also gone out tonight.
I've been around Dundalk a long time. We don't do moral victories. That's going to hurt. It's going to hurt for a while. Real sense of disappointment, and something that will take a while to get over.
Welcome to the ExtraTime.com Friday podcast after what has been a busy sporting week, and still plenty to come over the next couple of days. We'll have more on a mixed night in Europe for the SSE Airtricity League clubs, with the reaction from Vinny Perth, Graham Gartland and John Flanagan shortly. As well as all that, the Premier League season kicks off this weekend, and ExtraTime.com's Tom O'Connor will talk us through the Irish players involved. Of course, it's also All-Ireland football semi-final weekend for the men and women of Dublin and Mayo, as well as the ladies of Cork and Meath. We preview all of those matches with former All-Ireland winner Sinéad Stagg and former Mayo manager Stephen Rochford.
In the context of their last game, they beat a team that's going to be in Division 1 next year. And they beat them, I think comfortably by 8 points. We're far from seeing a demise in this Dublin team.
Monday morning's podcast will review all of those games, and we will also have reaction from the Under-20 All-Ireland football final between Roscommon and Offaly, which promises to be an exciting encounter. Either way, it will be a great story, because whoever wins that will end a long wait, and those two aren't regular All-Ireland winners, certainly not at the top level, so you can't help but be happy for whoever wins that game. Anyway, we'll have more on that on Monday. First up, we were hoping for a terrific Thursday for League of Ireland sides in Europe. Unfortunately, Bohemians' adventure is over following a 2-0 defeat to PAOK Salonika in Greece, and Dundalk also bow out following an unlucky 2-1 defeat to Vitesse Arnhem in Tallaght. League leaders Shamrock Rovers progressed to the next and final qualifying round with a 2-0 win against Toyota Duras in what was a professional performance from Stephen Bradley's side in Albania. Before we get reaction and analysis from Tallaght, let's hear from ex-Longford, Drogheda and Shamrock Rovers defender Graham Gartland, who was on commentary duty for Shamrock Rovers' stream of their victory in Albania. Rory Gaffney with a brace of goals in that game, by the way. I started by asking Graham what kind of performance it was from the Hoops.
Tuesday came out obviously a little bit more aggressive than they were in the first leg. They tried to sort of press Rovers from the start. They ended up having a chance around the 16-minute mark where they probably should have scored. A gilt-edged chance from Safari, doesn't even hit the target. And then Gaffney goes and puts them one up for a wonderful goal. And from that moment on, Shamrock Rovers were in control of the game. I felt that probably a little bit more composure in the game, and the game would have been a lot more comfortable for them. Tuesday huffed and puffed, but ultimately they didn't have the quality to trouble Rovers over the two legs. And then Scales does wonderful for the goal, lays it on, and the keeper comes rushing out and Gaffney slots it. But over the two legs and on the tie as itself, I think Rovers thoroughly deserved to go through. I think Tuesday just basically wasted the game in the home leg. And or in the leg at Tallaght, I think they just wasted the game. So from that point of view, Rovers were the better side. They forced the game. I do think, like I said earlier, if they had a little bit more composure, maybe at certain times, I think that the game would have been a lot more comfortable. But it's a clean sheet in both games, and they're through into the next leg to play Flora Talon.
And I don't know if you've seen much of Flora Talon, but Rovers won't have any fear of them, will they? I mean, they have more than enough quality to go into that game fancying themselves.
Yeah, Oisin, I agree there. I think if you offered any Irish team the opportunity to beat Flora Talon to get into the group stages of a knockout competition, I'd take it. On the other hand, I think they'll be looking at it the same. If you can beat an Irish team to get into the knockout stage or the group stages of a European game, they'll they're looking at a winnable tie as well. But I think, again, with Rovers' experience in Europe and the fact that the first leg is over there, which means the second leg will be in Tallaght, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for Shamrock Rovers, and just as they're hitting top form as well, they've been really good in the league campaign with great victories over Pats and Dundalk, and obviously a comprehensive win over the two legs in Europe as well. So they'll be going into that one full of confidence, looking to, basically make the group stages, which is a great achievement in the first year of the competition.
Graham Gartland on Rovers' 2-0 win in Albania. It wasn't a good night for Bohemians, who lost 2-0 to PAOK Salonika. After the game, the manager Keith Long said, "We wanted to progress. We had an inner belief and confidence in the group. The overriding emotion now is that it's a missed opportunity." I saw on Twitter Conan Byrne defending Keith Ward for a bad miss that he had. I didn't see the game, but Conan said something to the tune of, yes, it was a bad miss. Yes, he'll probably think about it, but Bows wouldn't be as good as they are without Keith Ward. And I'd have to say I agree with Conan on that wider point. Didn't see the Bows game because I was in Tallaght, but Ward is a top-class player. Anyway, Dundalk were feeling somewhat similar to Bohemians after their 2-1 defeat against Vitesse Arnhem, meaning they lost 4-3 on aggregate. The Dutch side were 2-0 up at half-time before Hubin's penalty with about 20 minutes to go gave Dundalk some hope during a good second half display. In the first half, they had chances as well. There was one stage in around 23 minutes where they forced Schubert, the Vitesse keeper, into 3 good saves in a row. The analysis of former cup-winning Dundalk captain John Flanagan, who was on duty for LMFM, to come. But first, here's Lillywhite's manager, Vinny Perth. I put it to him that they lost a game that they could have won.
There's a real sense of regret there, and ultimately, look, they've won the game, but we've pushed a multi-million-pound club to their absolute limits there. I think they leave Ireland and are very, very lucky to be still in the competition, but they are. And look, I've been around Dundalk a long time. We don't do moral victories. That's going to hurt. It's going to hurt for a while. As much as I'm proud of certain parts of our performance, we've got to learn from it and move on and accept it and make sure the club is back in Europe next year. So real sense of disappointment and something that will take a while to get over.
If you can recreate what you did for large parts of tonight and large parts of the first leg for the rest of the league season, you've a great chance of making Europe again through the league. Are you confident that you can do that?
I think we've done that as well at times. I think, to be fair, like the first 45 minutes last week against St. Patrick's Athletic was our best 45 minutes probably of the season. People don't see that. They see the result when we ran out of energy and our squad just wasn't right on the day. But look, we've 45 points to play for. We're definitely on the back foot. It's not that we're chasing 3 teams in the European spots. We're chasing 5 or 6 because there's a couple ahead of us as it is. So it is difficult, and we don't have much margin for error. So it's going to be difficult. But I think this team is as good as any other team in the league. I think they've proved that over the last 2.5 months. And that's the challenge. We've got to make sure by the end of the season this club is back in European football as best we can, and we owe it to the club, as staff and players, to do that.
Best of luck for the rest of the season.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
It is the extratime.com Friday podcast, and at the moment I'm standing in Tallaght Stadium with John Flanagan, former Dundalk captain. John has just witnessed Dundalk's 2-1 loss against Vitesse on the night, 4-3 on aggregate, so Dundalk and Bows out of Europe. John, you were co-commentating with Adrian Taff for the Dundalk stream of the game, and it has to be said, although they lost, they put up some fight.
Yeah, I think Dundalk, their performance was wonderful tonight. From the very first minute they came out and they went at Vitesse. Duffy was very unlucky early, and I think it was in the second minute with a disallowed goal for offside, and they kept going, and they could have dropped their heads very easily with the first goal went against them. There was a bad touch with the centre forward to give them the opportunity to shot, and then when the ball bounced, it spun away from the BB and goal for a tap in, and probably the one moment of quality that Vitesse have that was for the second goal. But after that, they could have easily dropped their heads, but no, they came back at it, and they really went at it hammer and tongs in the second half, creating chance after chance, and they got their just rewards with the penalty. And even right at the death, Michael Duffy had a wonderful strike. McMillan was inches away. They can be really proud of the performance, and I think, as you said already, but between themselves, Bohemians and Shamrock Rovers, they've really done the league proud in Europe this season.
We watched the game, Aoife and I, from basically the corner flag over on that far stand, so we didn't have a great view on the Vitesse goals. Were they soft? Should they have been dealt with better by Dundalk. How did you view them?
Again, when we've the privilege of looking at the replays up there, but the first goal, the centre forward, he miscontrolled it. It actually came off his toe, hit his hip, and that wrong-footed Nadestad, which meant Boyle had to come in, and he put in a wonderful block. But the ball went up in the air, and a wicked spin on it, deflected away from a baby. He'd no chance, and it just fell to a Vitesse player for a tap in. So they were very unfortunate for that goal. The second goal was probably the one bit of a good play that Vitesse had in the first half, where they really cut the Dundalk defence open and showed their quality. And when N'Gola went through, it was a wonderful finish. He just slotted it under a baby. So the second goal was fair enough. But before that, Dundalk had 5-6 chances where the keeper made some wonderful saves. And as I said, in the past, where they may have dropped their heads and lost their way, they kept going, and Vinny really gave them a shake at half time, and they came out and they dominated the second half. They had again 5 or 6 chances where keepers made great saves, or they were fortunate balls which went the wrong side of the post. So again, I know it's a defeat, but they've got to be encouraged with that performance, and the hard thing now is going to be trying to carry that forward into the league campaign.
It's Derry on Sunday. Although I'm not sure I'll say a long time to go in the league, there's still a lot of matches, but they need to start winning because they're 7th at the moment, and as it stands, they're not getting back into Europe next year unless they can go on a run in the league or win the cup.
Yeah, to be perfectly blunt, I suppose that their league form hasn't been good enough. If they can carry their European performances into their league campaign, they'll pick up points. But it's at that stage of the season now where games in hand and all that, they're no good. They need points on the board, and they need to start picking them up quickly, because teams ahead of them aren't going to drop that many points from here to the end. So hopefully, starting on Sunday, they can pick up 3 points, and they need a real push, 4 or 5 games on the bounce where they pick up maximum points to get them back into that European hunt, because these are the nights that Dundalk have become accustomed to, and these are the nights that the fans want, and that was the whole model of the club have been based on European income. So they need to get themselves back up the table, and quickly.
How much are they missing Chris Shields, or is that just a go-to excuse?
To be fair, I said it last week, I think it's a real sign of Sam Stanton's performances and how Greg Sloggett has come on, that I don't think they're missing him. To be fair, I mean, Chris Shields has been superb for Dundalk in the last decade, and he's a loss to any side, but everybody else has stood up. I think Sam Stanton has been a revelation in there. Different player than Chris Shields, but he's been really, really good. And I think the balance of Stanton with Sloggett and either McElhaney and Patching in there has been really superb. So Chris, while again he'd be a loss from any club, he's a superb player. I think that everyone else has stood up, and we haven't really missed his presence in there.
And as you say, if they can reproduce on Sunday against Derry what they produced tonight for large periods of the game, they might be all right.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to remember these clubs that the likes of Bows and Dundalk and Rovers are playing, they're on a different playing field to us. I mean, Pauk, who Bows played against, they sold a player to the Premier League for 10 million quid. I mean, that buy the stadium and every player in here. So this is the level they're playing, and they're showing that they belong at this level. But the thing is, they've got to do it week in, week out against teams that maybe aren't going to allow them as much possession. They've got to.
Is that possible now that they're out of Europe? So it's a bit of a silly point I'm making, but now that they're out of Europe, they can maybe concentrate on the league, or it's possible to concentrate on the league, because good as that team is, it's not a huge squad, so it's hard to push on 2 fronts, whereas now they're only pushing on 1.
Yeah, and that has been probably a factor of late, that players haven't been able to get a rest. They've been playing midweek and weekends, and games have gone to extra time, and as you said, bodies are thin on the ground. Hopefully we have some injuries coming back, the likes of Dan Cleary, hopefully he's not too far away. So these players now, they'll have more time to prepare for league games, they'll have more time to recover and recuperate. So hopefully they will be able to put in this level of performance. I mean, the intensity levels, the energy levels there tonight was phenomenal, and that's what they're capable of. And they've set a standard for themselves, and it's up to the players now to basically ask that of each other and demand that of each other every weekend from now till the end of the season.
Former Dundalk captain John Flanagan, thanks for joining us on the extratime.com Friday podcast.
Brilliant, no worries, anytime.
A mixed night in Europe, and more on that to come with Extra Time's Tom O'Connor. We'll also take a look at the Irish players in the Premier League as the English top flight returns this weekend. Now, though, it's Gaelic games, and shortly Sinead Stagg will look ahead to the Ladies All-Ireland semi-finals between Mayo and Dublin, and of course Cork and Meath. But first, former Mayo manager Stephen Rochford on the eagerly anticipated men's game. Before we hear from Stephen, here's 8-time All-Ireland winner with Dublin, Philly McMahon, on why Dublin and Mayo games are so special.
It's a really special game in that it brings a different energy, it brings a different physicality, questions you mentally. It's a battle. It's what you want. It's where you want to be. It's what you want to be involved in. Two really good teams going at it head to head and playing expansive football. It's just where you want to be and what you want to be doing.
It is the extratime.com Friday podcast. Stephen Rochford, former Mayo manager, joins us now. Stephen, how are you?
I'm good, Oisin, and yourself?
I'm not too bad. It's a huge weekend of football, not as big as it was supposed to be, given that Tyrone and Kerry is, for the moment, on ice, but hopefully will be played next weekend. But there's still some huge encounters going on in the under-20 final. There'll be emotional scenes regardless who wins between Offaly and Roscommon, because that'll be a big deal for both counties. Then in the ladies' football, there's Mayo against Dublin in the All-Ireland semi-final. That's on before the men's game on Saturday, Mayo against Dublin also. And obviously on the Sunday in ladies football, you've got Cork against Meath. Our concentration with you, Stephen, lies with Dublin and Mayo in the men's. I've heard an awful lot about the rivalry between these two in the lead into it. As a coach or as a manager, do you tap into that on the week of a game, or do you try and maybe even leave that alone because you don't want guys too emotional? You don't want them focusing on just that side of it. You actually want them maybe with clear heads and thinking of the game plan that you come up with.
Yeah, it's look, there may be an incident or something that might have happened in the past that you might reference, but typically as a focus point or something that's a motivation really doesn't occur. I think you very much try to keep it in the here and now and what's relevant to the game that's in front of you. And both, look, Mayo and Dublin are very, very familiar with each other over the last 10 years. But at the same time, there's been a number of new faces and some guys that are there going back to 2011, but there's, or 2012, should I say, but there's, there's a lot of new faces that are in that and that are creating its own rivalry, certainly over the last 3 years as well.
Am I oversimplifying it by saying it's a brand new Mayo against a Dublin team that are on what some people say the down cycle, or maybe they're a little bit older, and it's a kind of a contrast of teams and where they're at? Is that too simplistic? Is there any accuracy in that? What do you think?
Is it a new Mayo? They're the Mayo team, I think, it has evolved with new faces. So some of them are probably, you might think that they're new, but they've been sort of around the scene for the last 2 to 3 years, or maybe even 3 to 4 years if you go back to some of them have been on development, on senior development squads and whatnot. But and then guys, I suppose, like if you take the likes of Conor Loftus, who over the last 2 years has been consistently a starter. Like Conor has been involved in the squad going back to as far back maybe as 2015 or so, or 14 maybe even. So there's there has been a change, obviously with the number of retirements and whatnot over the last 2 years for Mayo. There's obviously been a change, but then there's still a lot of guys that are there. Rob Henley, Lee Keegan, Paddy Durkin, Cullen Boyle is still there, Aidan, Jim O'Connor, Stephen Cohen, all these guys that were played back in 2015, Kevin McLaughlin also, 2016, 17, on up into 19, 20, and obviously again this year. So there's a bit of change in Mayo, but there's still a fair element of familiarity. And in Dublin, I'm not so sure about our Dublin this thing of being on the slide. I think what you've seen is a really pragmatic and controlled approach to Dublin. I think that comes with just a cycle of real maturity in it. I think only maybe this year may have had only maybe one, maybe two guys that have sort of made championship debuts, and with that level of experience and maturity, I think control and they're not rattled by what probably analysts or spectators are saying. I think there's certainly obviously an element in them, which is they don't need to. There's no race against the scoreboard. I think maybe in the past, and you're going back a couple of years now, but Dublin were laying big scores on teams, but now I think it's very much it's control, it's a possession game, and it's that sort of death by 1,000 cuts, and they really look to strangle the opposition. So, in the context of their last game, they beat a team that's going to be in Division 1 next year, and they beat them, I think comfortably by 8 points. So I think we're far from seeing a demise in this Dublin team.
What kind of game do you think this will be, Stephen?
I think the Dublin Mayo games, I don't think it'll be any different than what it has been over the last decade. It'll be man on man. There'll be an element of team trying to get an extra defender in there, but they'll be, whilst they may not all press as high as the full forward line, there'll be a reasonable effort in the opposition's half to win back possession. They'll both have plans for the opposition's kick out. They'll have plans for their own kick out. So it'll be an open game. I don't think it'll be played like a game of tennis where it'll be just up and down the field. I think Dublin are gone beyond that, maybe what they would have done in the middle of the last decade. 2015, 16, those games would have been a bit more up and down the field. 17 maybe even as well. Where now I think you'll see a lot more control, certainly with Dublin in possession. And I think Mayo will go at it. I think Mayo will look to play very much on the front foot and look to try and sustain that for as long as possible.
Is it the case for Dublin that we actually really don't know where they are because they haven't had to hit their top gear yet? Because look, Meath gave them a bit of a challenge, but as you say, then in the Leinster final against Kildare, they won comfortably against a team that's in Division 1. Dean Rock wasn't at his best that day and looked angry when he was shown on the big screen after being taken off. Now, whether or not we just caught him at a moment where he looked angry and it was a deceptive kind of shot, I'm not sure. But is it a case with Dublin, like we're going to see maybe this weekend exactly where they are, and we don't know yet. So there's no point in people trying to assess if they're on the downslide because we just don't have the evidence yet.
Yeah, well, I think with Dublin, we're because they've been so dominant in the game. I think there's a rush to sort of say, could they be coming to the end? Is it this? So is there somebody else now to take the mantle from? I think that there is that sort of rush or hope or whatever it is. But I don't think it's been fair to them. I mean, is that, when you're saying, have we seen Dublin, at their best, has that been any different than the previous 10 years, really? Yes, they got a shock against, not a shock, but they got a bit of a test against Meath for a period of that game. At the same time, having looked at the highlights of it, I didn't see the game live, and I never felt that they were going to lose it either. And when it came to it, the big players stood up. And against Kildare, I thought they really controlled the game and could have won it by more if they were pushed. So I don't think I think Dublin, with Owen Merchant and John Small, Johnny Cooper now has got 2 games back under his belt. With those guys now being reinforced into defence, likelihood James McCarthy may be pushed into midfield and Brian Howard up front. I think it gives just great options for them again, a real balance to the team and options again off the bench. If Brian Howard pushes forward, someone like probably a Paddy Small or a Cormac Costello, one of them may start on the bench. And again, then you're starting to see their bench starting to fill out with Cullen Basquel, a Costello or a Small, Bugler. You're starting now to see options on their bench. So, my own gut is that I think Dublin have been trying to time their run. And, certainly they'll be up for the Mayo challenge. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
What about Mayo? Do they start with the team they finished with against Galway, because they really sparked into life once Kevin Mack came off the bench in that second half? I mean, they looked like the Mayo that we're familiar with, whereas in the first half, I mean, Galway played well, so credit to them for that, but they were kind of slow and lethargic. They just didn't really kind of click into gear.
Yeah, well, in fairness to the group, they had that COVID issue back around the Leitrim game, so maybe that was a little bit still in their system in the early part of the Galway game. I always felt though that it's not control, but I always felt that around half time that they were going to click into gear, and that there was more gears in them in that context. And looking at it in the context of the Galway, a shot for a point comes off the post, it ends up in Galway's hand. It could have ended up in Pádraig O'Rourke's hand or Michael Plunkett's or Lee Keegan's hand as easily. And that sort of goal opportunity that isn't really created then, or you don't concede that goal. And someone like Shane Walsh, the quality and pace that he has, he's going to do that to any defence. But so systematically, I didn't feel that they were being cut open, and that it was a case of them just getting their running game together. Obviously, the introduction of the two McLaughlins, along with taking over the middle of the field, dominating their own kick out, and really going to town on the Galway kick, it gave them a mighty platform to get that running game going. And there's no better team in the country that when they get that running game going, to really cause you trouble. And I think, where Mayo find themselves now, I think they're playing better maybe than what they were playing going into last year's All-Ireland final. I think against Tipperary, whilst they scored a lot of goals, I think some of them were coughed up easily by Tipperary, whereby Mayo looked really in control against a team of their peers, if you know what I mean, in Galway. So Mayo's form, I think, is good. I think they've got really good pace. But can you afford to? And that's the conundrum that James Horn and the management have, is that, do you try and have the two McLaughlins and whoever else coming off the bench with 40 minutes to go or 35 minutes to go in the second half, and the risk in that is that you're 4 or 5 points down, I suppose, at half time. If you aren't, you can release the boys and it's a smart move. If you end up being 4 or 5 down at half time, and Dublin's ability to dominate the third quarter, that's, they win the third quarter by a point, and next thing you're 6 points down with 15 or 20 minutes to go. That becomes a really big challenge, because Dublin don't concede goals easily. We saw against Kildare, they concede a really super goal, but they don't typically concede systematic goals. So that battle of being trying to pull back a potential 6 or 7 point deficit going into a final quarter becomes a really big mountain.
Did they go after Evan Comerford from the start, as in press up and really test him, because he's been flawless so far? I mean, if you didn't know and you looked from a long distance, you'd think it was Cluxton. But again, we're probably going back to the thing of Leinster wasn't that much of a challenge so far. But so what do you do if you're Mayo in that regard?
Yeah, I think, I know what you're saying in relation to you go after. I think, respectfully, Evan Comerford has shown that he's going to command that Dublin jersey into the future. I think he's I've been really impressed with Evan Comerford over the last number of years, through Ballymun, DCU, and obviously then when he was deputising for Stephen Cluxton, and now sort of as the number one, at least for this season. I don't see are Dublin weakened by Evan Comerford there. I think because Stephen Cluxton was such a big player for them, you could say that they're slightly weaker than they were previously, but they're not weakened as a team compared with others. Evan Comerford is the top goalkeeper, and I think he'll be well prepared for Mayo coming, setting up for the kickouts. I think what will be fascinating in that is, though, what he hasn't probably been put in is a position with 25 or 26,000 in a championship situation, and goalkeepers make errors, balls go out over the sidelines. How does he react to that? But I don't think Mayo, respectfully, will have a plan to say, "Oh, there's a weakness in Evan Comfort, we're going to go after him." They'll set up with a plan, because his stats are as good as anybody in the country as regards his kick-out efficiency.
I'll tie two questions into one here, because I know you have to get away. One, where do you put Aidan O'Shea? And two, if Mayo are to win this, how will they go about it? I won't ask you your prediction, because I think you'd have to answer with your heart. You'd be a bit like me last week. You know the opposition are the favourites, but you still have hope. So I'll leave you off on that question if you can answer me the first two.
Yeah, I think Aidan will play somewhere on the spine of on the attack side of midfield. He's going to spend some time in the middle. He's going to spend some time, around the 40 if it's just breaking lines, not necessarily with his back to goal. And he will spend some time on the edge of the square. So that blend has typically worked for Mayo over the last two seasons. Probably not as much as they would have liked maybe in the All-Ireland final last year. Yeah, they got a couple of frees off it in the second half. But there is value in I suppose in having Aidan at full forward, insofar as it'll present a focus, I think, to the team to move the ball quickly by foot. That's not necessarily just about long ball, but I do think that Tommy Conroy and Ryan O'Donoghue have the best opportunity to blossom with some quick ball. And Mayo then, in the winning of the game, they have to get the balance right in what is obviously the strength in their running game, with providing that inside line with some early ball. And the potential in getting that blend right is that Dublin find it a bit more difficult to know what's coming next. So that's the strength of Mayo in many ways. It's around execution and really looking to execute that against a team of Dublin's experience and quality. That's a big challenge. But I do think that Mayo are playing with a confidence. And there's no, like, down here, there's nobody saying, book the 4th of September in Dublin. But there is an element of, we're going to take these guys on. And I think that's justified in how the team has performed over the last number of months. But it's going to be a big challenge.
It should be a really exciting match. Mayo against Dublin in the All-Ireland semi-final by 2 on Saturday, of course, because the Mayo and Dublin ladies also meet on Saturday earlier in the day. That would be just as good as the men's. Stephen Rochford, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Oisin.
We'll look back at that game in full on Monday, when we'll also review the ladies All-Ireland semi-finals between Mayo and Dublin, and Cork and Meath, both being played in Croke Park. Before we hear from former All-Ireland winner with Mayo Sinead Stagg ahead of both games, here's Mayo manager Michael Moyles on trying to take down the 4-in-a-row champions Dublin.
We have the potential to ask an awful lot of questions of them. They are All-Ireland champions, and for very good reasons. They are very good. They can be very physical. They can slow down the game. They can speed up the game. They're excellent at an awful lot of things, but we have the potential in our ranks to cause them problems.
We're joined now by former All-Ireland winner with Mayo Sinead Stagg, who will join me on Saturday for commentary of Mayo against Dublin on Midwest Radio. Sinead, Michael Moyles, the Mayo manager, just said there that they can cause Dublin problems. How and where do you think they can do that?
Yeah, I suppose in looking at Mayo targeting Dublin at the weekend, Mayo have to go out and play exactly the same way as they did initially against Galway, when they just clicked it as a team. And their speed and dynamic flair in the forward line, just got them over the line. Now, I suppose ultimately they ended up only winning the game against Galway by 4 points, but they should have been able to go on and close that out a bit earlier. I suppose in the defence, you see Terry Kennedy has done great work with the Mayo players in formulating a great defence line. And I suppose that was lauded by Dana Finn there at centre, at full-back. And her position in the field and her strong hands, I suppose, in helping the full back line there. She's a huge addition to the defence line for Mayo. She's a real good communicator and a leader there. And she's Saoirse Lally to the right-hand side of her, and Roisin Durkin with her huge decisive running from defence into attack, which Mayo need in every game that they go out and play. So if Mayo, like we say, bring this game to Dublin, Mayo won't fear Dublin. Like they've already lost, I suppose, significantly by 17 points in the semi-final of the league. And, so all they have to do now is go out tomorrow and just throw everything at them. And they need to take every opportunity that they get and put it over the bar and take any chance they get in front of Ciara Trant. They know where to put it.
I was listening to a feature-length interview with Michael Moyles during the week. Obviously, we played a clip of a short interview there, but he said in the league, if they'd have taken their chances when they came, they would have been a lot closer to Dublin. Is it possible that they've closed that gap in the meantime?
Yeah, well, definitely they'd have learned an awful lot from that game. I suppose they went in on a high in that league game down in the Gaelic grounds in Limerick against Dublin. I was actually at that game and lucky enough to see it in the flesh, but Dublin were just unstoppable that day. Like Dublin took their chances from the very, very start. They had Jennifer Dunn running from deep in the middle and Lauren McGee, and between Niamh Heatherton getting the first goal within the first 5 minutes and Sinead Ahern following that up and Jennifer Dunn. But Mayo also had chances in that first half and they didn't take them. Have they learned from that? We have huge scoring ability up front with Rachel Kearns and Sarah Rowe and Grace Kelly that I suppose maybe they're coming at the best time right now. And, where else would you want to put on that show but Croke Park? So hopefully they'll have their scoring boots on tomorrow and, as I said, take every chance they have in front of Ciara Trant.
You mentioned Jennifer Dunn there and Lauren McGee. Like so many of the Dublin players, they can run through you, they can run at you, they've got speed, they've got pace. How do Mayo set up here? Do they go player for player? Do they go defensive and set up a system? How do you think it'll work? How do you think it should work?
Well, definitely they're going to have to man mark Carla Rowe for a start. She's the huge threat up front at the minute, particularly coming in after scoring 2-3 against Donegal, and I suppose she was the leading light against Donegal for Dublin. Dublin have strength all over the field. They do have to stop the running from source, we'll say, from deep of Jennifer Dunn. So even if they can just block up the middle, Mayo very much did that against Galway in the quarterfinal, where they set up that defence of the D. And if they can just stand in front of them, use that positioning of, putting the player out in the area that's on their weakest side. Not that I'm saying Jennifer Dunn is a weak side, but, if they can try and just put every advantage into Mayo's side. Galway would have, I suppose, historically always laid up like that in the defence, and they didn't do it the last day, but that was definitely Mayo's biggest surprise on the day was their setup of the defence. Like they just completely blocked up that D, and if they can stop the running of Jennifer Dunn and Lauren McGee and getting, if they can curtail that ball into Carla Rowe, well then they have some chance. But they definitely need to, as I said, retain possession themselves as much as possible, and they have to limit the unforced errors, because that's where Mayo can get caught in the hop if they're a bad pass and it turns over, and we get punished for that every time.
I won't ask you your prediction because I think it's tough to ask a Mayo person to predict against Mayo, and I have a feeling I know what your prediction would have to be if you were being truly honest. But do you think Mayo could win this game, and if so, how?
Mayo have nothing to lose, and no team is unbeatable. Mayo have to believe in that when they go out tomorrow. They have to go out and it's not about the occasion tomorrow. It certainly won't be about that for Dublin. Dublin, it's like going into their home pitch. But for Mayo, they need to, they can enjoy the event and everything else, but it's a game that they have to win in order if they want to get to the All-Ireland final. And, they haven't been in an All-Ireland final since 2017. And it's a long time since Brendan Martin has come over the Shannon. So, it'd be wonderful to see, like, there is a good mix of experience and new personnel coming in. But everything has to go right for Mayo if they've any chance of beating Dublin. Like, there has to be speed. There has to be, as I said, they have to break down Dublin as much as possible and just not let the ball in. They also have to be disciplined and not lose any of their players. Like, the last thing we need is for Mayo to go down to 14 players and at a crucial stage in the game. And I suppose a lot of that as well will come down to, like, the refereeing on the day. Like, I suppose there's been a lot of talk about the inconsistencies in the refereeing and maybe changing the interpretation or the meaning of the word, or of non-contact. I know Mick Bohan was quite verbal and Maxi Curran about their game, and I suppose I'd agree in some regards. I know Rena Buckley's kind of agreed with that as well. Like, maybe they should change it to the likes of minimal contact, as they've done in the Camogie Association, as opposed to non-contact. Like, at the end of the day, you have Maria Riley coming out with a broken jaw in 2 different places after a non-contact sport, do you know what I mean, which isn't plausible. So, like, the LGFA definitely need to look at that in terms of how the wording, because the inconsistency, as I said, Maxi said this, like, in trying to coach a team into how to stop the build up of the game, and we say the frontal charge. There's so many inconsistencies in the game that you go out one week and the referee lets it go, and then you think you can do it the next week, and then you could be sin-binned for the exact same type of a foul. So there's a lot of work, I suppose, to be done, and it'll be interesting to see, with all the talk that's gone on this week in the refereeing, will that affect, I suppose, Seamus Mulvihill's interpretation of the rules? We'll say tomorrow. Like, he already refereed that game, the semi-final of the league. In Kerry, and he also refereed the final of the league between Dublin and Cork. So it's interesting to see that he's down again for this Dublin game tomorrow in Croke Park. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes forward.
Sinead, before I let you go, I want to ask you about Cork and Meath, who are playing in the second semi-final on Sunday, also in Croke Park. Meath have been the fairy tale story of the summer. Can they keep the fairy tale going?
Well, look, you took the words out of my mouth. Meath are the absolute fairy tale. Like, to come from losing 2 consecutive intermediate All-Ireland finals to finally beating Westmeath and to now be facing Cork in the All-Ireland senior semi-final, it's like a dream. And I was just thinking about this morning. I believe the last time that Meath were in a senior semi-final was in 1999, and that match was played in Parnell Park in Dublin. Against Mayo ourselves, and I actually scored a goal that day myself against the Royals, and we went on to win our first senior All-Ireland. But Meath went out in the most recent group game against Cork and only lost by 2 points. And I know the Cork or Meath will be looking at, we'll say, all the newspaper clippings and everything else going on about 6 years ago, where they lost by 40 points before the relegation to Cork. So, like, that's huge ammunition for Meath to be going in to see how much they've progressed game on game. Like, they've adapted so quickly to senior football. They're so well structured, and Eamon Murray took over, and his management team took over this team in 2017, and the girls have just bought into his plan, and they've so much, like, every one of those players is an offensive player and a defensive player. Like, I was watching the game against Armagh, and I mean, again, I pretty much was shocked by that result. I really didn't like the work rate that Vicky Wall and Emma Duggan had put into that game, and then so many other girls. But, like, Vicky Wall had lost the ball at one stage. She ran right back to the 14-yard line on the opposite end of the field and came back up again and got a score. And it's just, I thought the work rate that they continued to do throughout the entire game, where I thought there's no way they can continue this in the second half. But they did. Like, they're intense running, like, they're so strong on the ball. Like, you have Emma Troy then coming up from corner back, coming up to score a goal. Like, they really, really have such work ethic, and they're really exciting to watch. Cork, on the other side, they just haven't been playing with the same conviction of old. Like, they've just been doing enough to get through games. I don't know if Orla Finn's going to be playing. Like, she has had injury. Darren O'Sullivan is back, which is a positive, but they have been missing, a bit of composure up front. They still have huge players in Emma Scally and Breach and Ciara O'Sullivan. But it'll take a big performance from all them to stop Meath. Meath are, I suppose, building momentum, and it's a really exciting time for Meath. I was listening to a podcast yesterday from the LGFA, and three other players, Denise Masterson and Michelle Ryan from Waterford, they all went for Meath, and I'd be kind of, backing them myself, thinking, there just doesn't seem to be a weak link in the chain. But look, Cork have been here before. Cork could just, come out here tomorrow, or they're actually out on Sunday. They're well used to Croke Park, and Cork can surprise anybody as well. But it'll be an exciting game, and it's really exciting times for me, certainly.
Sinead Stagg, former All-Ireland winner with Mayo, thanks for joining us on the Extra Time Friday podcast. If you want to get even more on those semi-finals, Sinead mentioned a podcast there that was produced by the LGFA. Just go to the LGFA's social media channels, and you'll be able to find the link to it. Sinead, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to working with you for Midwest Radio tomorrow in Croke Park.
Thanks, Oisin. We'll see you tomorrow.
It is the extratime.com Friday podcast. We're back in Tallaght Stadium in the aftermath of Dundalk's defeat to Vitesse Arnhem. The Premier League starts this weekend. There isn't as much Irish involvement as we would like. In fact, when I pitched the idea of talking about the Irish in the Premier League to Tom O'Connor of extratime.com, we kind of discovered that there isn't really much to talk about, but there is in the Championship and League One, and we'll touch on those players as well. Before we get to that, Tom, what did you make of Dundalk's performance tonight?
Heartbreaking, Oisin, to be fair. Look, they dominated the game. They dominated more so the second half. Abibi was a virtual spectator in the second half. Look, it's one of those nights where the results didn't go the way for the League of Ireland, but at this stage, if you can't stand up and be proud of the league after the performances, obviously, of Bohemians over in Greece and of Dundalk tonight, you witnessed the Dutch team kick the ball long. You witnessed the Dutch team go from a back three to a back. They were very fluid in their back three. We saw it last week, and we've seen it again this week. And all of a sudden, the last 10 minutes, they're kicking the ball long. They go to a back four, and they're just hoofing it. They don't care where it goes. They're picking up yellow cards like confetti for the last 5-10 minutes. And at the end of the game, they're relieved to come out of Tallaght Stadium with a 2-1 victory. They felt that they were coasting. They made it maybe a double substitution. Maybe 70 minutes they thought they were going through, but the last 20 minutes they were living on the edge, and they're delighted to be going back to Holland with a narrow, very, very narrow victory. Dundalk did themselves proud, and it just didn't fall for them. But I mean, you can't but be proud of Dundalk, and obviously with Bows as well with the league tonight. So look, it's heart wrenching, but it's a step further than the league has been before.
Okay, let's move on to the Premier League. It's back this weekend, and if you want a detailed preview, go to the second Captains Are Off the Ball. What we're going to do is talk about the Irish players in the Premier League. Tom, who should we be looking out for? Sadly, this will be a very short conversation.
In terms of, look, I've broken this down into the probables, the possibles, and the maybe we might see them at some stage. And the reality is that your only starter is probably going to be Seamus Coleman. Last season he would have played 25 league games for the club. You have John Joe Kenny, who came back, who was on loan at Celtic last year, came back. You have Mason Holgate, who's also kind of rivaling in that right back spot, but Seamus Coleman signed a new contract in June. He's got a new manager this year under obviously Rafa Benitez, so he could be reinvigorated. 32 years of age. He's what we call an elder statesman. He's obviously, he's an Irish captain as well. So look, reality is Coleman will probably start. Beyond that, then everybody's guess is as good as mine. Matt Doherty at Spurs, he kind of shared the games at right back with Didier Aurier last season. Now look, he's been reunited again. Like same as Coleman, he's a new manager, except in Doherty's case he's worked with them before. You've Nuno, who he would have had a good relationship with at Wolves, obviously played probably the best football of his career at Wolves. Could he be revitalised at Spurs? Who knows then? I mean, you go to the Newcastle duo of Kieran Clark and Jeff Hendrick. Clark would have played around Christmas time last year. He would have been a fixture in the Newcastle defence. The captain changed, and there's a lot of competition in central defence for Newcastle now. Hendrick midfield,
again, Newcastle have competition there. He hasn't played 90 minutes for Newcastle since January. But look, he's a versatile player. We know he can play centre of midfield, defensive midfield, or he can play on the right wing as well. So maybe his versatility we'll see a few appearances out of him this season at Newcastle, but I wouldn't hold my breath. We've a newcomer to the Premier League in the shape of under-21 cap Nathan Collins, who's gone to Burnley for 12.6 million this summer.
Okay, that's good, isn't it? Because they wouldn't have spent money on him unless they planned to play him.
And I was just going to say, now look, we know that the kernel to Burnley's success over the last couple of years has been their central defensive partnership with Ben Mee and James Tarkowski. So look, there've been rumours and stuff over Tarkowski leaving and for a big fee over the summer. At the start of the summer, that really hasn't proved to be the case. So it looks realistically that they're going to keep the two central defenders in midfield for the rest of the season. And look, that means another Irishman is going to be resigned to the bench at best in the shape of Kevin Long, who's been there a long time. But I mean, look, he only played 8 Premier League games last season. So Collins and Long at Burnley are two central defenders who we will hopefully see more of. Collins, like I said, 12.6 million is not to be sniffed at, but Mee and Tarkowski are your starting centre halves there.
If Tarkowski stays, he might be sold because they could have bought Collins with an eye on selling him, and the window is still open. So anything is possible. Anyway, let's move on.
Absolutely. Then I suppose, look, you have you have your promoted Norwich City. You have Andrew Omobamidele, who had a fantastic end to the season as Norwich went up as champions, and he was supreme for the last month or two. He was a super addition to their defence. He was singled out by Daniel Farke at the end of the season. Your problem is now that 8 million has after been spent by Norwich on Ben Gibson. So the reality is that an experienced centre half partnership is what starts in the Premier Division. So you have Ben Gibson and obviously you have Grant Hanley, who'll probably be the starting centre back pairing, but Omobamidele will be thereabouts. If he wasn't going to feature, they'd have been sending him out on loan at this stage. But like I say, the promising start to his Norwich career, we would be hoping to see some of him featuring probably off the bench and maybe.
He's the kind of defender I think Stephen Kenny will like, considering that Norwich play a good style. They'll play out from the back, and that's what Stephen Kenny wants to do. Yeah,
I mean, look, going forward, I mean, the Irish system of play is becoming more and more possession based, and more, we're going to need ball playing centre halves. So I mean, look, that's going to possibly, unfortunately, maybe signal the end of the likes of Shane Duffy's Irish career. I mean, I'm not going to write him off, but I mean, his strengths lie in his aerial capability and his ability to tackle other players. Whereas if Ireland look to be having more of the ball, obviously you want somebody who is a more, the term, progressive passer rather than somebody with more rugged ability. So look, I mean, we mentioned there that Shane Duffy came back. He had a rough spell at Celtic last year. I mean, he'll be looking to maybe re-establish himself at Brighton with their sale of Ben White to Arsenal. But the reality is then you have Lewis Dunk, you have Adam Webster back there. If Brighton go to a back three, which they were playing a little bit of pre-season, you have Joel Veltman in there. You also have the giant Dan Byrne, who's also an option at centre half. So again, we probably could see Shane Duffy slipping out of the reckoning at club scene, and then I mean, it's going to be harder at the international scene for him to stake a claim for his place, like, you know, if he's not playing. Then also at Norwich, going back to Omobamidele, we've Adam Ida, who we saw burst onto the scene last year. He's unfortunately was injured and then came back, scored in the last game of the season. Norwich tend to play a 4-2-3-1, so they've only a single place for a striker up front. Obviously, we've seen Timu Puki is prolific striker. They've also got Jordan Hugel, who's a more of a frame that Adam Ida has a bigger kind of a striker. And then they're also after signing Josh Sargent, who is a USA international from Werder Bremen for the guts of 10 million. So again, look, fourth choice centre forward for Norwich is where we're looking at Ida at the minute. Will he go out on loan? Who knows? And again, similar to Duffy, if he's not playing regularly at international or at club level internationally, you know, it's going to be hard for him to stake a claim. Up front, then if you're talking who the options up front in the Premier Division, we Shane Long, who was at Bournemouth last season in the Championship. He has returned to Southampton. Michael Obafemi is still at Southampton as well. Now, Obafemi was hinted at going to Blackburn possibly as part of the transfer merry-go-round, but between Man City and Villa and Southampton. Southampton sold Danny Ings to Villa. They brought in Adam Armstrong from Blackburn. There's talk that Obafemi might be going to Blackburn. If he doesn't, obviously Armstrong is now a threat up front at Southampton. They've also got Che Adams up front, and they're after signing Broja, who, as we're sitting here in Tala, Broja was actually on loan in Vitesse from Chelsea last season. So Obafemi is unlikely to see many minutes up front for Southampton. And up front, so that leaves us up front with possibility of Aaron Connolly. Aaron Connolly last started a game for Brighton in February, last scored in January. Danny Welbeck obviously came into the Brighton squad towards the end of last season and obviously did very, very well. You've Neil Maupay, also competition up front, and then Leandro Trossard also played up front. So Connolly is going to face serious competition again for minutes. And those are the guys that we would probably expect to see a few minutes of. You have a few players, mainly goalkeepers, who most likely will not see anything over the season. You've Kevin Kelleher, Darren Randolph, both sub-keepers at their respective clubs, and Rob Elliott, who is after being promoted with Watford, he's now third choice keeper at Watford. So they're going to be in the Premiership, they're Premier League players, but we're not going to see, the chances are we're not going to see much of them. Conor Hourihan, another one who's at Villa. Hourihan, it's hard to say at the minute. He spent a very successful loan spell at Swansea last season. He got 19 games and got 5 goals. However, Villa are after spending a lot of money to replace Grealish. We know on Buendia, Leon Bailey and Danny Ings. So you've also got the likes of McGinn in midfield as well, Douglas Luiz as well, and Marvelous Nakamba as well. So you mean it's quite a packed midfield in Villa for Conor Hourihan to break into. So again, he's there. He's a Premier League player. He's in a Premier League squad. Will he play? He's going to find it tough to start.
So I guess we're kind of looking towards the Championship, which started last week, and I watched a bit of West Brom and Bournemouth. I was double screening with the Derry Drogheda match, but what I did see was Callum Robinson and Darragh O'Shea scoring for West Brom, and of course Travers in goal for Bournemouth, and a young lad whose name I can't remember, his first name I can't remember, Kilkenny, in midfield for Bournemouth. Yeah,
the Irish scoring got off to a good start last week in that game. Now you could also say you've Mark Travers and goals. Would we have preferred if he kept a clean sheet? Well, maybe.
I call him Malachi Travers again. I have a tendency to do that and confuse him with the former Wexford cornerback.
And Wicklow goalkeeper.
Was that the Wicklow goal? Was there another Travers played in goal for?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I could be
Mervyn Travers. That was Mervyn Travers.
My
yeah, big tall
Mervyn,
guy.
another M.
Who actually, I think, played a bit of soccer cross channel as well.
Yeah. I'm learning from this conversation. Could be the school holidays, but look, every day is the school day. Yeah, I mean, look, that's the sixth position for Ireland. You have a couple of contenders there. I mean, Jason Malumbi would have been an option there. You have could Conor Hourihan possibly be an option there, or like you say, young Kilkenny in the centre of the Bournemouth midfield. That could be another option. Darragh O'Shea, look, we saw last season how accomplished a defender he is, and again, like you mentioned, he's as comfortable with the ball in the air as he is on the ground. The future could be Omobamidele and Darragh O'Shea, and look, we've seen Callum Robinson has, he's great flexibility up front, can play left, right, or through the middle. So look, I mean,
you know what? This conversation is actually going longer than I thought, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing in the sense that there's maybe a bit more Irish interest than I thought. Bad thing for two reasons. One, a lot of those Irish players, judging from what you're saying, especially about the Premier League, mightn't see a whole pile of game time. And also, we wanted to keep the podcast kind of tight, even though time is infinite on the internet and we could go as long as we want. Is there 2 or 3 players in the Championship that you can tell me to watch out for, Irish players?
Well, last week, Festi Abasele and Louis Watson played in the Cup for Derby, and Abasele won man of the match. So look, he's right back. He's somebody to keep an eye on. Like we said at the outside of the conversation, Seamus Coleman is going to be playing at right back for Everton this year. Could he have competition by the end of the season at international level from Festi Abasele? Hopefully. So there's me two, Louis Watson and Festive Basil to keep an eye on at Derby.
Okay, Tom O'Connor of extratime.com, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to wrap it up now because Vinny Perth is finishing his media interviews. I'm hoping to go down and have a word with them. I know that will sound confusing if you've listened to the whole podcast because Vinny Perth will have been on earlier, but the way it was recorded, I did this before I did the interview with Vinny. Tom, will you keep an eye on the Irish players for us throughout the season?
Well, indeed, Oisin, no problem.
Thank you very much. Tom O'Connor of extratime.com. Thanks for joining us on the extratime.com Friday podcast here in Tallaght.
Slán.
That's it for this week. We are, of course, back on Monday with all the reaction to the weekend, as well as a preview of the All-Ireland hurling final and much more. The news last night, Thursday night, is that Peter Casey can play in that match. His red card overturned, so he will be able to feature for Limerick, who take on Cork in that final. In other hurling news, of course, Brendan Maher of Tipperary announced his inter-county retirement in the last 48 hours or so. You know all about Brendan on the field if you watch hurling at all. But off the field, I can tell you he's a really great fella. I'm lucky enough that I've got to know him over the last couple of years, and he's an absolutely top man, top hurler as well. And no doubt he'll continue to work hard and be prominent for his club, Bursley. Remember, you can get in touch with us via Twitter at Extra Time News or at Oisin Langan. That's it from us. Whatever you're at this weekend, enjoy, take care, and stay safe.